Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 68th episode of the Pika Serenity podcast. I am one of your hosts, Emerson, and due to some technical issues, we are not actually streaming this today. I don't know why, Twitch doesn't want to let me stream. It's dropping 70% of my frames. It's just not working. But this will go up on YouTube later, so if you're watching this, hi from the past. But before we
Oh,
move on, we are, of course, as always, joined by my co host, Anomaly.
hi.
And he's going to do the rest of the intro because I have ice cream.
I'm super jealous of your ice cream, I'm not gonna lie. I'm just talking about that. Yeah, so welcome, friends. It's been a really slow week this week. I mean, other than maybe two things I think we have on our list, basically non-existent in terms of WoW news, which sort of sucks because it means like we really don't have anything to talk about. So this is definitely not going to be another 2 hour episode. It'll probably just be a hair
We
under an
say
hour
that.
50, and it'll be like an hour 50. I feel like we can get it in there. But yeah, so not too much has happened. I think in terms of before we jump into weekend review, I think not much is happening in the game for me. I am, however, good news or maybe news to everyone. I will be playing or pushing to play my Mistweaver on our next
Ooh.
clear. So we're gonna try and get back into it.
Have you seen my
Um,
Mistweaver Parsenum on Sun King?
I have seen your Mistweaver parts on Sun King. It's okay. I mean,
Oh,
you need,
don't look at the healing parse. The healing parse is ass. The healing parse is gray. I actually might get a green one this week. Fingers crossed. Damage parse,
nice.
though. I was top 100. My first time.
No, no Mistweaver's damage on that fight. I will tell you. Too busy
I
just.
don't hit a single, like, the first time we killed that boss with me playing Mistweaver, I didn't get any inner rates, so I actually was during the first shield phase. So I drank my sleepy pot,
Yeah,
and then I just DPS the boss for the whole phase.
that's awesome.
And it
That's
turns out
awesome.
if you don't do any healing during the shade phases, you get a good damage parse on Sun King
That's
as a
true.
Mistweaver.
That is true. That is true. That is awesome. Yeah, but I think that's the big news for me is we'll be seeing some Mistweaver play. I think in our reclear since my Paladin is now essentially done gear wise, except for maybe a weapon on Sire, and the fact that I think we have a Paladin coming back in my guild, and I think 3 Holy Paladins next year might be a little overkill. So
Yeah.
we'll see what's going on. Um, but yeah, anything new over on you're playing Mistweaver on Sun King, which is great. What other boss are you playing Mistweaver on?
Oh, none. That's the only
Oh,
one. We
it's
one
kind
tank
of
Sun King now, so I just like play Mistweaver for. Why wouldn't you? Honestly.
it's true. It's fun. It's fun.
Um, if our Windwalker had a weapon, Mistweaver, he probably would too.
Yeah,
It's
not too
so
bad.
good for that boss.
That's hilarious. It's
Um,
hilarious.
but I mean, not a lot happening. Raid leader had to step down again twice. That's
Oh
twice this tier. Different people, by the way. Um,
no.
but having already gone through this once this tier, we're a little bit more prepared to
Yeah.
handle that like handover. So, um, things have actually gone okay. Like he's still around right now. He's occupying like a regular raider spot while me and the guy who's also like we're gonna do a raid lead thing just because neither of us are really prepared to do the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um
Exactly.
and so while we're getting the hang of things, he's around and we're gonna be able to ask him questions and things.
Oh, nice.
But
Nice.
we decided to kick things off by trying to change our Stone Legion General strat.
Just speed strat.
Not
Speed
quite,
strat.
not quite.
Oh. Oh.
We
We
didn't want
did.
to go all the way onto the street speed strat. We really try and change specifically like our second intermission
Okay.
to do single dunks and then push that phase faster so that we're not just sitting around waiting for CDs to do an AoE burn and then sitting around in phase 3 until Lust
Yeah.
comes up.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. We
That did not work, by the way.
Oh, it didn't. No.
We actually ended up going back to something to our original Prague strat, which is not the strat we had been killing it with. Because we had started like holding the second Goliath in phase 2 for the intermission and using that orb to dunk.
Yeah.
But actually, after the nerf to the knockback range from Renethal,
Yeah,
It's actually way easier to just kill the Goliath and do the AoE burn in the intermission and just like sit on your hands. Because you can dunk during an eruption now. It's totally safe.
that's true. That's true.
So,
Yeah, I mean, that's not too bad. So, I mean, back to the original proc strat. I like it. I like it.
also coincidentally, our fastest kill because we cut quite a bit of time off of our phase 3 because died.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's helpful.
um,
Yeah, we did the speed strat for the first time this week. So four healed, basically held the second Goliath into the intermission phase both times. So
yeah.
I just killed as they came up. It took us, I think we sat. It took us about 45 minutes to kill it. So I had a couple wipes in there,
We
but
spent probably 2 hours on the boss, and honestly, I think next time we try and adjust the strat, we're gonna go all the way for the speed strat.
yeah,
But I don't know that that's gonna happen right away because we didn't do a full reclear last week. It took us long enough to rekill Denathrius that missed killing Council. Like, oh no, we didn't kill Council.
yeah.
But yeah,
So you know what we've been doing? We have not been full clearing, but what we've been doing is basically killing the four, right?
Mhm.
Shriekwing, Sludge, or Stone Legion, and Denathrius, and then picking which side to go to. So either we do like Huntsman, Hungering, Enerva, or we do whatever Council, Sun King. Is the other guy
Artificer.
possibly? Yeah, yeah, Zymox. So yeah, that's what we've been doing at least in our sort
Hmm,
of reclears today. So
that's interesting.
yeah, it's just I mean the problem is like we only do Council because our Shadow Priest still need a conduit, and
Hmm.
then like we only and then like the other side. I don't know why we kill the other side. I'll be completely honest with you.
We spent
So
so much time debugging stream issues, by the way, that my ice cream is melting.
I know I see that. That's not good. All right. Well, I think that's it for maybe our week in review, and let's go into the actual week in review, which is two things this week, which is probably the
Hmm,
smallest amount
three,
of. I mean,
three.
three. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Three things. So I mean, I think there was a couple. I mean, some things happened, but I think by and large, in terms of like impacts to Monk and just in general, there's not a lot. It's been a pretty light week. So first up is really not really Monk or even retail related, but it's something that I think we'll probably end up talking about a little bit, maybe in passing, is that they lowered the cost of the BC character copy to $15. So of course, this was the original thing where like if you wanted to keep your classic character and you wanted to keep it in classic, but then also move it to the Burning Crusade server. So basically have your character copied in two places. Blizzard was charging you $35 to do that. Of course, you could either keep your character in Classic or move it to BC, vice, either or for free, but they offered a service to copy it. So they basically lowered the cost of that service to $15, which is still a lot, but I mean, it's money that it's like a normal service for them. Like their services seem overpriced anyway, and this does not seem as egregious in terms of pricing. So
This really just lays bare how like arbitrarily high they're because
yeah, I'm
even $15 is really high. Like if they
yeah.
don't want people to abuse the thing, let's put a cooldown on it.
Yeah. Or disallow it to start with. Like that's the other option is like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Basically say you get a choice, either stay with classic or move on to BC. That's it. If you
I
want to
think
do
that's
classic.
I don't think that's ever gonna fly, honestly.
I mean, I think now it's too late, but I think if I was a designer, I think that's probably a choice I would have pushed for.
Yeah.
And the only reason I say that is I think you don't win when you give someone the option to keep both. Because you either offer it for free and everybody does it, or you put a number on it and dollar amount, right, or some sort of inhibitor, whether it's a dollar amount or a cooldown. It doesn't have to be monetary, right? And people
Yeah.
are going to bitch and complain about it.
It could have also been like you can keep one character.
Or yeah, you get one copy, right? You get
Yeah.
one character you can. Yeah, that's fair too.
Which
That's fair
like
too.
in my case, my druid up to almost level 41. Getting there.
Oh, you've been working on it.
Yeah, it's
I
definitely not hitting 58 before next week. But
Yeah.
have been working on it. Conveniently the new Castlevania season came out.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've heard good things.
But I wouldn't like there's no reason for me to have a level.
No, no. I mean, like, I think, yeah, I think it's gonna. I think to be fair, classic dies with this. which I think is to be expected because people want to play the newest thing, go to the next one. And if you really enjoyed Classic to play Classic, I mean, I guess you stay, but you'd probably be used to like the lower population anyway. So
What I
I
actually
don't know.
expect them to do is that they will end up consolidating a bunch of the classic servers down into like one or
They're already doing
two
that.
with the remaining. Do we know how much they're consolidating yet?
Yeah, so they announced they're merging basically the remaining Classic realms, I think, into 4 or 5 groups.
Okay,
So there's 4 or 5 groups of servers, but they are merging a large number of them together. Yeah.
I expected those to get consolidated further down to like one realm,
Yeah, probably.
and
Yeah.
then in a couple years we will get a new vanilla progression server kind of thing, where it will like basically when Wrath launches, we will get new vanilla progression server that will eventually progress to BC, and it will like then progress to Wrath in the future. So there's just this constant like there is always a progression server in each expansion.
Yeah.
Basically, is what I expect it to be.
Yeah, because that's normally how the private server sort of like cycle worked, right? Like you'd have one
Something
server
like that.
launch and then you'd play it for like maybe, hand for whatever the time period is, and then they'd shut
Private
it down or
server
people would.
stuff, I would say, is actually driven a lot more by uh, administrative drama than any other singular factor.
That's fair. That's fair.
Having
That's fair.
actually at one point been involved in that, um, it plays a big role in servers living and dying. I will say.
That's fair. That's fair. Um but yeah, so I mean they added character copies. They lowered the price of character copies for BC, which I guess that's good. I guess people are still complaining. Like people
Yeah,
complaining
I
about it, but
think this is really just going to give more ammunition to people saying these character services should not be this expensive, which they shouldn't. Like Limit talked about on stream that like to transfer everything to Alliance, or Max talked about on stream. Sorry, he's Max, not Limit. Uh, that it would have cost them like several grand to transfer their guild to Alliance, and that's just nuts.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I mean, even like the character services, right? Like when I moved from Alliance to Horde, back at the end of WAD, yeah, it cost me $55 a character because I had to do faction transfer and server transfer.
Yeah,
And so at the time, I moved one character, and then have slowly, as since moved the remaining probably 3 or 4 characters I cared
like
about. So
there is no way I should be paying new video game price for a character for basically a faction change and a realm transfer.
but it's about
No
the journey,
way.
Hamilton, and you're skipping the journey.
No, I'm not.
You
I
can make
already
the
did the
journey for free.
journey. Also, the
You
journey
can make
sucks now.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, I mean, it's always been overpriced. It's the way Blizzard has priced things. I mean, to be fair, this isn't a lot of people. I saw a couple of comments like this is like Activision coming in, and I'm like, this stuff's always been overpriced. Like it's
Yeah,
just always been
it's been
expensive for
overpriced
Blizzard. So
since it first was released.
yeah.
And
So I
like
mean, this isn't.
originally, the reason the prices were like that is they didn't want people doing it, but they were like, well, we have to. There was enough pressure that they like had to let it happen, but they didn't
Yeah.
want people like moving their characters all over the place all the time. So there was stuff like there was a cooldown on name changes, there
Yep.
was high fees, and eventually they got rid of the cooldown. Um, but the fees have stuck around because I mean, money, 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 money,
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. It's free. Yeah. Free revenue for people moving around your game. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, BC character copy. It's cheaper now. So congratulations. Um. So that's the one thing, and then I guess the next up is I just labeled this Asmongold tweet in the
Yeah,
in the notes, but Asmongold, basically largest WoW content creator on the planet currently,
yeah,
and really just a massive streamer also on Twitch and stuff like that, tweeted out basically a very long form twit longer just about like his feelings on the state of the game, how he feels on certain topics, and just sort of why, what he thinks are the issues with the underlying game. And just sort of I'll call it a rant because I think that's what it ended up being. I think he makes a couple of good points in there. I think some of it is a little off. But I think coupled with his sort of post and some of the interviews that came out, the interview with Ian last week and then the interview with Morgan this week,
Yeah,
um, there's a little bit of like, I don't know, it feels like you might be hitting some sort of a mark here. Um,
he's I would say far more right than wrong.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah,
he occupies this very interesting space where at one point he was rating. He was never like a world first high end raider or whatever. Like someone like Preach has been a high end raider, been like world top 50 at least. I don't know how high he actually went. Like
he was
he's
a
been up
method, by the
there.
way.
Huh?
Preach was a method. Preach was
Preach
a
was a
method when they
method.
got
Okay.
world first. Yeah, we got a couple world first. So
Yeah,
yeah,
okay. So like he's way up there. And people like Sloot, another big raider, like Asmon rated, but way more casually.
yeah,
And has been for the previous like multiple expansions been a like basically casual WoW player for lack of a better word. Like he puts a lot of time into it, like a lot of casual players play the game a lot, but they're not
right.
doing any of the like high end organized content.
Yeah, exactly.
And so him coming at these problems like this really lends credence to the idea that it's not just the Raiders throwing a hissy fit, or not just like the wannabe glads throwing a hissy fit. Like there's legitimate issues with the
Right.
system's design for the past couple of expansions.
Yeah, and I think he had some really good points where he talks about, the fact that like every expansion Blizzard has to come up with a new system or a new, and I think he gives the example of like a new wheel, right?
Yeah,
And like every expansion Blizzard tries to invent the new wheel and it takes them a little bit and they finally get to a working new wheel by like the 9.3 or the .3 patch. I was gonna say 9.3, but the .3 patch, right?
yeah.
And then they
Throw it away
throw
and
that
start again.
wheel in the garbage and start trying to reinvent the wheel. And I think there's something to be said about that. I think the other thing too is that like a lot of the systems, and he makes this point also, they're just derivative of the last probably really innovative expansion, which was Legion,
Yeah,
right? Which he calls Legion. And I think, BFA was basically, trying to refine Legion systems. And I think to a lesser extent, Shadowlands is also very much like that. I think
yeah.
Torghast is probably the one shining example of something different. Um, but maybe I disagree slightly with him because now that I'm thinking about it live, like Blizzard tried war fronts. They tried to do war fronts, which would have been a
Warfronts are
different
just scenarios, though.
r- right, but they were a different kind of scenario. They're different sort of larger scale
Yeah,
PvE only scenario. But I think that falls into the same reason that people are probably not as excited about Torghast now is that it was set up that you'd never fail those things.
yeah, it
Right.
was also Warfronts. Not to get too far off on the tangent here, but Warfronts had the issue that nobody knew what they were supposed to be, and I'm fairly certain nobody at Blizzard knew what they were supposed to be either. Were they supposed to be a PVE scenario where you saw something related to the story happen? Or were they
Right.
supposed to be like an RTS game where you went in with your guild, with some friends, or with a pug, and you were the minions that are part of an RTS game?
Yeah.
And that idea, by the way, I think is bad. No, nobody wants to be grunt number 32.
Well, there's yeah, I mean, let's not go down that out
But
because there yeah. But yeah, I guess to be fair, yeah, you're right. Warfronts I didn't really think had a good direction from the start, right? But the idea is
yeah,
they tried something there.
yeah.
It didn't
Honestly,
work.
like I think if Warfronts had just been like a new battleground, right,
Yeah, I would have been fine.
it would have been better. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think that Warfronts count as a new
Right.
system.
That's fair. That's fair. So then I mean then really like BFA really had almost nothing and then you have Legion or you have Shadowlands now where it's like only Torghast, right? The rest of it, we don't have Azerite armor anymore, but we have sort of the conduit system, which is very similar, or similar in terms of the way that it works.
Yeah,
We have
conduits.
covenants. Yeah, we have covenants, which are sort of a derivative or sort of an idea on like order class halls and sort of aligning to a faction that way. But Torghast is really that only new one. And I mean, the problem with Torghast is it's like I think it's just not fun because there's no danger in it, right? Like I think and this is so we talk about this a little bit. We'll talk about this I think a little bit, but I think the main thing that Asmongold gets to is that like th- Blizzard is sort of rehashing the same thing over and over again. There's a formulaic thing to WoW that a lot of people who've played WoW forever do not enjoy, right? Like there was always the new raid, you get excited for the new raid, like that's
Yeah.
part of the formula, but now there is the Blizzard introduces new system. Raids are still great. So let's like take raids out of this because I think raids are always going to be good at Blizzard, right? But you get this new system and you give a bunch of feedback that it sucks in alpha and beta, like the community does. Blizzard says, no, 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 you'll like this. We don't like it in 9.0 or whatever .0. They make a minor change, or maybe they hold fast in 9.1 or .1. And then they started loosening and started saying, oh, well, in dot two, we're going to make all these changes that are going to make it great, but never really acknowledged that most of the changes they're about to make are things people said a year ago
Yeah. I mean,
about what to make it big.
probably the most extreme example of that is Azerite, where Azerite almost wasn't on beta. Um, and while it was on beta, the fan
Was it 6 weeks
feedback
maybe?
was unanimously just like, this is awful.
It doesn't make sense.
Um, and
Progression's terrible.
it was awful. So they made some changes in 8.1. We got like the extra Azerite trait row and more
They remove the
nerfs to Azerite
requirements.
trait costs and that. But then 8.2 hit and it was actually so bad that they basically discarded it. Like we still got Azerite gear drops,
Yeah.
but you could unlock all of the traits for them in a week of Azerite grinding. Like not even like I never did island grinds. Like I'm sorry, I'm not willing to get that far
Yeah.
with this goddamn game. um, and I had all of my shit unlocked by week 2 of the patch.
Yeah.
The new thing, of course, was essences, which I was actually talking with a guildie last night about systems in WoW. Actually, very similar subject,
Yeah.
and um, they were like, "Oh, essences were great," and I was like, "I ran Crucible of Flame, Null Dynamo, and Conflict and Strife for 2 years."
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
I actually think he did have a good point though, because the existence of individually bad but over budgeted as essences doesn't invalidate the whole system, and there are
Right.
definitely some good things there. Like they did good things there, like you could change essences with a tome. Why can't I change conduits with a tome? I don't know.
Why is conduit energy a thing when it's so yeah, like that's the other thing is like why is it when they eventually remove like if they so here's what I'll say if they eventually remove conduit energy, that might be the thing to me where like I probably end up not enjoying this game for real because to Asmongold's point, like one of the points that he also makes is that like a lot of people think like Blizzard is betraying them, right? Where like, you know, by putting these types of systems in, it's sort of like a betrayal and they end up changing it and coming back. But the fact that like generally speaking, like I think a lot of the player base expects this sort of cycle now with Blizzard where it's like dot .0 is going to suck, dot .1 maybe slightly better, but then dot .2 and dot .3 is really when you want to play the game because that's when they've gotten it right.
Yeah,
And if that's like the cycle, the game's boring, right? It's similar like it's funny. I follow Destiny 2 slightly in terms of a different community, right? And it's funny that a lot of like some of the content creators there have mentioned that like Destiny 2 is much better to play like a month after the release of a new season for them because they've sort of ironed everything out and like all the
yeah.
gating that they put in place up front is gone and it's just like you can just jump in and do
Man,
whatever you want.
imagine if the gating in a WoW patch was only a month.
Well, yeah, that'd be beautiful. But that's what I'm saying is like there's there's this idea of games being like a set time where like developers almost don't develop experience like I'm not going to say all developers but the idea is some of these games feel like they're not being developed for like to be experienced or to be played at any pace but to be played at a very directed pace
Yeah.
and like I think that is unfun like that's
Oh
not
yeah, I agree.
exciting it's just like the fact that like I will tell you that like I've always had more fun in WoW when I failed at things than when I've actually just been given like handed things, right?
Yeah, I mean that's
Like,
why LFR is boring. When you had to do LFR as a chore, like
yeah.
I remember doing LFR in Dragon Soul for tier gear because
Oh, because the bonuses were so good.
the
Yeah.
bonuses were so good. Like, yeah, it was really boring, and I wasn't even a raider at the time. Like, I was doing it for PvP purposes, and like PvP bonus, like the bonuses in PvP were pretty good. Um,
Yeah.
I don't even remember what they were at this point. like they were pretty good. So like just go do LFR, get your 2-piece. Like ideally you get like them on the low budget slots, so the fact that their LFR gear doesn't matter that much.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it like that kind of, and I'm honestly astonished that we're way off on the table now.
Yeah.
But I'm honestly astonished that Torghast turned out the way it did, given the literal decade plus of experience they had with LFR, and everybody complaining about LFR being a boring chore every single time it's been relevant.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that sort of segues into slightly into like the thing that I linked you. We didn't put this on the notes, but there was like
Yeah.
Kevin Jordan, who's one of the original WoW developers. You know, he's part of the original
Apparently
team
he
that
did a
put it together.
lot on vanilla, like
Yeah, he did.
class
He was one of the main.
design, systems design,
Kevin's a
design.
he's a really good dude, really smart guy. He did a YouTube video I linked to Emerson probably about an hour ago now. The about where he talks over Asmongold reacting to Ian's interview, and sort of Kevin talks about this idea where that like current WoW is set up that if you never fail, when you do, it sucks, and if you just always succeed, it sucks because you're in like that situation where like it's always the dopamine hit. They talk about this in games where it's like that's the reason you always want to pull the slot machine thing is because when you hit, it's so exciting, right? But you don't hit every time.
Yeah.
Like, you don't always win the jackpot every time you pull the thing. So it's like you get that little dopamine hit, or you maybe get like a little win, you get make your money back, whatever it is. But like that's how they keep you engaged, how you keep you fun. In WoW, with like Torghast, the purpose of Torghast is to get a legendary. That's your dope. That's what you're heading for. But like the idea
Yeah.
is like it's very scripted. It's like the actual act of doing an individual Torghast run doesn't matter because all you're doing is checking like I need to do 8 of these. When I complete 8 of these,
Check.
I get my legendary.
Yes.
And I'm not going to fail these 8. It's literally I just need to say, well, a Torghast run takes me 45 minutes. So I need to 8 times 45 minutes. That's the amount of time I need to invest and then I get my legendary. It's like a set schedule and it sucks. Like
Yeah. And I
it's
like
not
put
fun.
another way, like, okay, so I've been playing a little bit of classic, and classic leveling honestly blows most of the world content in WoW, in retail WoW, out of the water. Like it's so much better. And the more I play, the more convinced I am that it is just
I don't
unequivocally like there is not a single piece of world content in retail WoW in Shadowlands at any point in the leveling process that I would rather do than hop on my druid and run around Stranglethorn. Nothing.
That's true. I think yeah, and
And it
I
comes down to, so like sorry to interrupt, but like
yeah.
it comes down to like, so I was doing some quests where I had to go and get some stuff from Bloodsail Buccaneers, like very generic humanoid mobs, right?
Yeah.
And they are very inconveniently placed where there's like a few that are like out by themselves that you can kind of get one by one,
Hell yeah.
and then there's camps of them, right? Where there's like 2 warlocks and the mage and the swashbuckler, and they're all in range where if you don't like pull one out at the right time in their path, that they pull everything. And so there's just like layers to this, right? Not only is
Yeah.
it like, okay, so pulling everything is going to kill me. Pulling 2 things probably still going to kill me because I'm doing these like on level. They're not, I don't, these aren't green mobs. These are like orange and yellow.
Yeah.
Uh so I really want to pull one thing. And if I do end up pulling 2 things, I probably have to like blow potion and things like that to
Of
survive
course.
until I kill one and then run away
Then
and
run.
try not to die.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so there's just like there, for one thing, failure is a very real possibility. I died a bunch working on that last night after raid. I
Yeah.
died several times. I probably honestly spent more time running back than killing. To be totally honest.
That's
Um,
awesome.
which is why my druid's not gonna hit 58 before TBC launch. Um, but it also requires like interacting with more than just my action bar, right? Like
Oh yeah.
I'm paying attention to pats, I'm paying attention to respawns. I'm trying to put like the swashbucklers are the easy ones. Those like they just auto attack you real easy peasy. The warlocks do like a shadow bolt thing that absolutely trucks, and like some of the warlocks have imps that do a fireball thing that also
Oh
trucks.
yeah.
Some
Yes,
of them
yes,
have
yes.
succubus that really just like auto attack you and are pretty fine. And then like the mages are real bad news too. There is nothing in Shadowlands. There's not a
There's that.
world quest. There's not an actual quest. There's not a story quest. Like, I don't even interact on that level with most of the raid trash.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that speaks to like the idea that I really think that WoW changed the way they operated in terms of like the experiences, right? So now every experience points to rating as the pinnacle, right? So like,
Yeah,
and right, wrong, or indifferent, right? They've tried to make Mythic Plus relevant. I don't think it is. They try to make PvP a thing. It's a thing, but it's like a small thing, right? Like everything you do in the game and every system is built upon getting you to raid, right? And raid is the end game. And I think over the course of streamlining that, getting people to that point the quickest, everything else has sort of suffered. So like questing has suffered. A lot of the ancillary systems that prop up your character that let you define things or be interesting or make you quote unquote like meaningful choices about your character are all in the service of getting you to raid.
yeah.
Um, and I think there are certain aspects of like the way games are played today that also influence this, like the fact that, you know, everything is optimized. There was no matter like back in the day, like the best person that you could optimize against might have been someone in your guild, right? Or might have
Yeah.
been someone on your server. Like that was your sort of
Yeah, you
global
might know
reach.
like who the best mage or who the best warlock on your server was. And
Right.
honest to God, sometimes they might have had the reputation as the best mage, and that would have been totally a lie.
Exactly. Yeah,
They
exactly.
might have just
And
been
so
a mage in the best guild.
well, yeah, that's generally probably what it was, right? And so nowadays you actually have like Discord and other communities and like Warcraft logs is a big one, right? Where you can see, all right, what is the most optimal way to do things? And I think in some cases, we're not going to change that, which is fine. So there'll always be a correct choice. But I think the idea that when Blizzard comes out and says, like, we're going to make these even or want you to have a meaningful choice, it's like every theory crafter, like, optimizers
Rolls their
laughing
eyes.
because it's not the case. So, like, the idea is then, well, why would, like, I guess the question then or the, like, what we need to
If
get to
if
is, like,
if you
how
can
to make
pick
it
anything,
interesting.
why would you bother picking anything? Like
Exactly.
if it doesn't matter, why is it exist?
Right. That's what I'm saying is like, is there a way, and this is really an open question, or maybe something that think about is like in game design today, particularly in MMOs, like is there a way to make it so your choices aren't sheet numbers, right? Because I think that's sort of the idea from like a game design perspective that they have to design for. Like Torghast being a chore is a chore because like you have to get legendaries, but like if what you did inside of Torghast couldn't be optimized, if there was more interesting things there where you could fail or something could happen, I think it'd be cool. Like similarly with like the choices you make from like
I mean,
it,
we saw them approach this with corruption, right? Where like there was a you couldn't just
that's true,
optimize your damage because doing that would have you running every slot max corruption. Like, and you just cannot do that.
right?
What ended up happening is the community largely agreed that like, you run, I don't remember what it was, like 39 or whatever for most
Right before the
progression.
40, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for most parts
Right
that
before
was
the thing from
the safe.
beyond things that would chase you.
Yeah, you would not get thing from beyond. You like run as much as you can without getting thing from beyond, and that was like a good break point for safe progression. And if you needed to push damage, you could go up to 59.
Right.
And for farm, I mean, early farm we had people running 59. Late farm we had some people running like 100 plus corruption on Shadhar.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes, I mean yeah, that was a good system. I just don't. I mean, so I was so totally off on a tangent here, but I
yeah,
mean, somewhat getting back to Asmongold's tweet. I think the idea is though that I think Blizzard needs to stop streamlining the experience to the top and take more time to just make the other experiences more engaging or exciting or like more sets to failure. Right? I think I don't know what it is, but it's almost like they want to get people to raid because raiding is the loop that keeps people coming back week over week,
yeah,
right? And like to be fair, I log in, you know, this week I did a little bit more, but generally I log in twice a week. It's one week, one night to do raid, right? And the other night to do Mythic Plus with a friend. And that's it. Right. Like, and it's not like I'm awesome. I love being able to do that because I can play other games, but like I'm also the type of WoW player that I'm not going to quit, like because the raids are still good. But I think other people who don't play the game to raid and want to enjoy it and play more of it, like I think if the underlying experiences were better, I don't know, like the level, like to be fair, I love leveling. Like I absolutely love it. I hate classic leveling. I'm okay with BC leveling. I think classic. I think so. Here's my issue with classic leveling, and I think it's honestly your experience is one, but then you have the experience that I had 2 nights ago when I was leveling my shaman. I was in Duratar, and I was getting I forget, I'm getting some item off Crocolists, the old crocodiles. And I went from the northern part of Duratar down the river that splits them and the Barrens, down to about 3/4 of the way down, killing roughly 30 to 40 crocodiles before I got the one item I needed. And like at a
Yeah,
certain point, dude, I'm
I
just
I
like,
do I do think that
I'm like, "Ugh."
yeah,
Like I don't need to get it right away. I don't need to get it on every mob I kill, but like after about 15, I'm like, please,
I
for the love
started
of
so
God.
I had a quest to get something off of the pirates,
Yeah.
and I killed like 20 of them, and I had to get 15 of these items. I killed like 20 of these mobs and didn't get a single one. I was like, am I killing the right mobs? Like I
Yeah,
went and
that's
looked on Wowhead, and I was killing the right things, and like magically after I looked it up on Wowhead, things started dropping.
dude, I also did something similar. However, I did that very early after 10 and then was like another 20 before I got like so I think there's like a
Yeah,
balance there, right? But I think to be fair, to your point, current leveling is a joke, right? People love it, but yeah, I don't know. I think
I don't
it's
even know if
too on
people love it.
rails. Yeah, I
I
mean,
have very distinct memories of one of my friends trying to get his wife to play,
yeah,
and they were doing leveling, and they had the XP boost from the old computer friend, and not only were they like out leveling everything, but this was in the era of WoW where even in leveling greens you just like one shot stuff half the class. So she was playing a hunter and she would just like aim shot something and it would die, and she was like, so when is it gonna get fun, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's almost like they built the leveling experience for like people like you and I who are leveling their like fifth character or sixth character, and we're just like we just want to get through it. Like we just want to
I mean,
be
I
quick
would
about it.
rather it be closer to the beats or the Wrath
Yeah,
of the Lich King was like a little bit easier, but also faster. So like, I think Wrath or BC would have been kind of fine.
yeah,
Cataclysm still had some degrees of like, well, Cataclysm honestly still would have been fine. Like the further you go on though, like Mop it starts getting pretty bad, and then Quad and Lead, it's just horrifying.
yeah. I think mop to me is the turning point. It's funny too because I think mop is the peak for me. No pun intended, because monks came
Yeah,
in there at the peak of Serenity. But I think to me, from like a overall expansion and fun and interactive, like I think mop to me is the peak.
right.
Or the top, right? Because I think it at that point they've blended enough of the story, like the way that they've wanted to present stories in terms of worlds changing and like
Mhm.
sort of get that like idea that you live in something as you play it, right? And all the quests and stuff intertwine. You have an overarching story. It's great, right? You're not just hey, the big bad is on the box and you're gonna fight the big bad eventually, right? Like it's
Right.
sort of a uh that twist with Garage, right? So I think MOP there is the peak, but you're right. Like that's to me the downturn where it's just like you're on rails and all you're trying to do is get to raid. Like that's literally all roads and systems lead to rating. So like do your things that get you to rating. I mean, I probably talked about this with like BFA and like the fact that like Island sucked not because I don't think the content was bad, but the reward was bad. Like the reason for doing it sucked. Like
I mean,
and
they were pretty boring. They
yeah, I mean,
I understand that not every piece of content has to be intrinsically fun on its own merit. Some of it is just fun because of the stuff you get on the other end of having done it.
yeah,
I don't personally super like that kind of content. Like it's not I would rather play something that is just fun and
yeah,
not have to worry about the reward than do something that's not like maybe boring
yeah.
and get something really good from the other end.
Yeah, I think if they would have made islands like Mythic Plus, where like the pulls were actually hard, and like you were fighting another like faction or to get like the to time it right. Like I know you're sort of doing that with like, sort of collecting the Azerite or whatever, but it would have been cool if they treated it more like a Mythic Plus, where like you couldn't just like run through an entire area, group 700 mobs together, and AoE it down, and like
I honestly think that the way the community misunderstood islands to work at the start of the expansion was how they should have worked. Like, because it was actually a really good idea where it was like, oh, the things you kill determine what kind of items and transmog and mounts you can get. So
yeah.
like you want to try it, and if you kill this kind of thing and then you get the dragon event, then that lets you get dragon mounts. And like
I
that
forgot about that.
that would have been great. Someone wrote
That
it,
would
even
actually been
wrote an
cool.
add-on for it. It was like obviously wrong, but like
Yeah.
did a couple thinking that was correct, and had a grand old time trying to be like, okay, I want this mount. Let me go and try and find things that are going to
Yeah.
give me this mount. And I was really disappointed when there was the blue post that said, "Oh, that's wrong."
Yeah, it's not how that works. Yeah. Yeah, they had an idea there. So, all right, I mean, we're sort of all over the place with this Asmon tweet, but I think he generally makes some good points. I think yeah, I mean, it's just the game isn't like I hate to be negative about the game because the funny thing is I still think raiding is fun. Like, I still think the raids are fun. Like the PvE aspect of the game, even the new mega dungeon is fun. Like
I haven't done that yet.
it's fun. It's fun. It's a good time. So I think there are like that part of the game is awesome. It just sucks that every other part of the game that you have to interact with to get there is like feels like it's half done.
Yeah,
It feels like it's like they've put in half the effort. And I don't want to say that people are like people who ever say like Blizzard devs want the game to be bad or like make these systems bad on purpose, I think are idiots. Because the idea if you make something bad on purpose, you literally don't want to sell like you people would stop buying it, right? It's not like
yeah,
you like I don't know, like I don't think WoW is a big enough thing anymore where like they just print money. Like I think it's just they have to continue to make it somewhat good, put in a good effort, or like
yeah.
you lose your job or like
I
you lose your audience. So I think that's a bad take. But at the same time,
I
I
think
think
you have a really solid point there in the everything leads to rating, and rewards are like that too. What's the reward from Torghast? Soul Ash. What do you need Soul Ash for? Rating and
yeah,
PvP
yeah.
and Mythic Plus. But like,
Yeah, but it's all in the service of rating. Like you want legendaries, you might want multiple legendaries because you might have a fight where like single target's really good versus
yeah,
AoE, and like it's just yeah. And to me, it sucks because like the idea was like when I started playing the game, like the idea was not to get to raid, right? Like the idea was like eventually I would like to raid, but that's like my like 6 months from now after I've done all these other things to get there. Like I literally remember talking like, I vividly remember this. It was like the early December in '04, talking to one of my coworkers who actually got me into WoW and being like, he's like, all right, he's like, if you level a warlock, I have a raid spot for you because warlocks aren't that played, and we need at least two. And we only got me and the other guy I know switching. So he's like, you got to do all this stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, but what happens when I get to like max level? Do I just get to raid? He's like, no, 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 no. It's like you got to do like all these dungeons. You got to get this gear. He's like, we're not strong enough just to carry you. So it was like I had like this idea in my head where like, all right, cool. All this stuff leads to leveling, or all this stuff leads to rating, but it's not like a given, right? Like I can still fail my dungeon runs. I can still like not
I
like get through
have
my
many
like
a failed
attunements.
strat home run.
Well, Stratholme and like UBRS, like getting through the fucking whelps in UBRS, like which is hilarious because I was in Pals for Life at the time, which old Leroy comes directly from them, right? So it's always fun doing it with those guys. But I mean, like, it's just like it's that thing where it's like
Oh, I didn't actually put that together. Holy
it was
shit!
so hard. Yes, yeah. So it was so hard to like get to the point where you got to, not hard, but it was like
It
you
was
put in
hard.
effort. Yeah, I mean, you put in effort to get to raid, and then when you got to raid, raiding was also hard, but it was like I've made it. Like this is
Yeah,
the pinnacle. It's awesome, and like now it's like I can queue for LFR and see everything that like some mythic guild's gonna do, right?
yeah.
Like for in most
I
cases, so
so people like to dunk on classic rating, and I've done it too. Classic rating is really easy by comparison to current
yeah.
rates. Like it's a complete joke. But for being a bunch of new players that had no fucking clue what was going on, they didn't have SimC, they didn't have
Or
raid bots or
videos.
Warcraft logs.
Figuring shit on your own?
Like when the game launched, nobody had damage meters. Nobody had threat
Yeah.
meters. It's actually really wild. Just like the evolution of those things leads to people in BC being a lot better just because people understand more how the game works.
Yeah.
So like doing that stuff in vanilla was actually hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I still remember, like, we would freak out at tanks for Veilstraz because like, we had to do the like, because he wasn't tauntable, so you had to, like, do, like, the threat thing. So,
Yeah.
like, basically, there'd be, like, a warrior, like, one warrior would start, and then the next one would just start executing, have a two-hander on and execute until they got aggro, and they had to quick switch to a sword and a shield and, like, move the boss real quick, and then, like, of course, we had one idiot DPS warrior that we had to use as a tank, but he couldn't hold it in for, like, 30 seconds, so he'd pull aggro early, and, like, we didn't know who was on, and, like, half the raid would wipe. And those things sucked, but it was fun. All right. It was like, it was awesome learning that and going, yeah, fuck, man. And I don't know. And the funny thing is like, I still get that feeling when we figure out bosses and when I kill bosses on Mythic, right? Not every boss, but I think on a lot of bosses, I feel the exact same way where it's like, even though there's like a video and a guide and we've probably followed or built our comp like that, there's still the accomplishment of like going in and doing it, like executing that, which I still find fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part of the game that I enjoy playing. It's everything else around it that I wish was better,
Yeah.
right?
I
So,
have so I have like 4 tanks at 60 right now that I've been working on catching up. Two of them are basically as far as I'm going to get them until I step into Mythic. They're like 210. One of them is my Paladin that I actually use Sun King progression because Rock Paladin does silly things too.
yeah.
Um, but doing all of the out of raid stuff sucks. Like I've been going through the Necrolord campaign on my DK
Yeah.
and just put out of my
Yeah, and I think to that point, and this is something that Kevin Jordan, which we sort of talks about this in sort of Torghast and the idea of like there is it is okay to let players fail.
yeah.
Like it is perfectly acceptable for you as a player to fail at something. And like the idea is that the reason you want players to fail is so that when they succeed, it's that much
It means
better.
something. When you've
Yeah,
wiped 200 times on Denathrius and then you get the kill, that means something.
feels great.
Personally, I think that 200 is too big a number for most people to enjoy the experience, which is
Yeah.
why mythic rating is such a like small segment of the community. But it does. And there are other bosses like Kil'jaeden or Ajara that took a lot of guilds in 200 pulls. It
Yeah.
really like pushed the boundaries of how far mythic guilds are willing to go for a boss.
Right. But then
But
you
yeah,
have that.
you're it's exactly right. Losing means that winning matters.
Right. It's the same reason Mage Tower is considered probably one of the greatest solo PV things Blizzard, probably one of the greatest things Blizzard has ever done. Like
Yeah,
I would hold Mage Tower as like probably one of the best things Blizzard has ever done in terms of like
yeah,
their design and a system, right? Because it was a solo thing that you could fail at. And
yeah,
like the only thing you got was some cosmetic,
yeah.
right? And it wasn't like a power increase. It wasn't something crazy. It was just like you
So
wanted to sit
here's
down
a
and do
fun
it.
question, a fun like thought experiment. What would the mage tower have looked like if they had tied like raid required materials to it for 8 point or 7.0?
It would have been shit because it would have been easy. Like the idea was it would have been you would have had to if it was required or was a part of raiding, it would have had to been something you could have done within like the first week or two of the raid doing it. And then of course you had to do it multiple times, right? On some sort of lockout. So like it would have lost its things. Like to be fair, I did not do Mage Tower after I beat it. I beat Mage Tower on my monk and I never did it again.
I did it on
But
everything except for like 2 characters, so I have almost all of them. I think I'm missing like Resto Druid one
yeah.
and one of the Shaman ones, and like I don't have anything for Major Morlock because I just didn't.
Yeah. Which is like I don't know.
But that
There's
like I did that because I found it fun, and at the time I was a casual player. Like I was in a heroic guild, and we would spend 2 or 3 months working on heroic, like, and that's how a lot of the player base engages with the game.
Yeah. Yeah. You know the worst part about Mage Tower was, by the way,
The
was
currency that you had to grind.
farming the currency to get the keys to do it.
Yeah,
And to be fair though, it was one of those things where it's like I'd be like, all right, I only have 2 runs in me tonight. Like I only have currency for 2. So I was like, I had to be ready. So I'd be like, I wouldn't do it right away when I'd sign it. I'd be like, I go do maybe a dungeon. I'd be like, I need to warm up to this.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, all right, I'm ready. And like that sort of like mental thing. I don't know. It's just so
I
like
actually
there's nothing
think
like
while I found the currency thing frustrating, I think it was actually good for it because I wasn't doing mythic rating. I was in like really crappy heroic gear from the
yeah.
previous tier because we weren't full clearing the current tier, that kind of thing. So I spent quite a bit of time doing the Brewmaster Mage Tower,
Yeah.
and the game saying no, you cannot put 100 wipes in this thing today was definitely made the experience better, even if the currency thing was very annoying. I
Yeah.
will say there needed to be some limiter on there. It didn't need to be that currency, but it did need to be something.
Yeah. No, yeah. It was probably the only part I disliked about it. But I mean that's another system where it's like you could fail and there wasn't really anything behind it, right? Like
Yeah.
but it's yeah, I don't know.
So by
I
the
think
same
we're
token, I think Torghast would be infinitely better if Soul Ash didn't exist. The more I think about it, the more I've thought about it. The tying of rewards to
yeah.
things like Torghast and islands and warfronts gutted them because they
Yeah.
couldn't make them hard because they
Yeah.
felt obligated to let players have the reward.
Yeah. You know
And
what you know what they should have done to Torghast? And this is the only thing they could have done. It would have been great. Put a cool looking mount behind it. Take one of the 300 mounts you might put in a store, you might tie to something else, and just make it. You do the highest level Torghast, you get a mount. That's it. Nothing else. You know what? I would fucking run the shit out of Torghast for that mount. It's the only reason I have KSM because I think the mount looks cool. I hate Mythic Plus. Absolutely hate it. I got KSM because I think the mount is cool. Like, if they would do like simple things like that, where it's literally just cosmetics, zero power, you're right. These systems would be 100 times better. Like, yeah, I would. I sorry, I got a little upset. I didn't mean to yell.
yeah,
It was
no, you're
like,
right though.
yeah. So I mean, I think the big thing we actually want to talk. So we talked. I mean, that's I think wrapping up the weekend review section, which is probably most of the show about Asmon's tweet. I mean, I think he comes from a place of like I think he really does actually care about the game.
Oh yeah.
I think I don't know if I agree with the way the words he uses or the way he describes it. I don't think Blizzard developers are incompetent. I think in a lot of cases they are taking design direction from people who are not designing are not good designers, I'll say. Like it's not that they're
Or
bad at their job.
designing a game that is not the game the players actually want. Something like
That too.
there's a
They
lot
are not
of
designing an MMO, right? They're
there's a lot
designing
of criticism of like mobile games being like pretty bad, honestly. But they're not bad like if what you as a business person wants is basically a gotcha game. What
yeah.
you're producing is not bad. It's actually pretty good if you wanted a gotcha game. But if you wanted like the Final Fantasy game that was basically a gotcha game, the Fire Emblem one. Like
Yeah.
if what you wanted was a gotcha game, you got what you wanted. But if you wanted a Fire Emblem game for Android, you were gonna be really disappointed like I was.
Right. Yeah. Which I guess I mean the funny thing is I don't know if the WoW that works if WoW had like a niche or was trying to be something, right? Like I think WoW is trying to be the greatest MMO RPG of all time and I just I don't think it is or has been for the past couple expansions, right?
Yeah,
Like
I the other thing too is I don't know why they keep it systems. And I think that is something that Asmon touches on as well as like why do they keep systems when all we want is we have a square like to quote him, we have a square wheel and in order to solve this, they keep trying to build us a hoverboard. And by the end of the expansion, we have like a halfway working hoverboard that like it's okay. It's not the greatest in the world, but it's okay. And then
goes
we throw it
I
away and we
agree.
start over. And really all we wanted at the end of the day was a round wheel, not a square one.
Exactly. Which is I think we've touched on this in even other ways around like the way that Blizzard has generally looked at feedback, right, from players and like how they responded to feedback and how some of the people that are Blizzard developers have come from the community and given similar feedback and then now get upset when players give them similar feedback, right? Like so I think there's sort of this is idea where yeah, like I think they're out of touch with what they're building.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so I don't know. We'll see. Maybe this changes. I mean we'll see. Like I think in this case, like 10-0 is really going to be where the rubber meets the road in terms of like, does Blizzard make a actual directional change here, or if they're going to continue down this path, they're going to continue on this path. Because ultimately, like as players and people who enjoy the game, like the best we can do is ask them to make changes. We can't expect them. So I think that's the biggest thing is that like, and eventually the way that this plays out is they continue to make a game that does not resonate with you as a player, with me as a player, with you, and whoever as players, and we just quit,
Yeah.
right? Which sucks.
Which, and the thing that honestly, the only reason that WoW still exists is because of the like social pressure to continue playing. Like when the game, even when the game, like I would have quit in its role, honestly, in BOD, working on Jaina, if it hadn't meant that I was going to screw 20 plus other people by doing so, I would have quit because it was
Yeah, and I
so
think
bad.
yeah, I mean, I would say that I almost quit after the end of Nyalotha, right? Like I
Yeah,
changed guilds for a couple months, and like I just needed to do something different because the game was so bad. And I came back, and luckily, I came back into a new expansion, so there's new stuff, and like it's kept me going. But I'm in a similar boat where like I don't know if it's for me like wanting to let down people because I don't think if I quit, like I don't think I would feel that way. But it's more that like I miss logging in on Tuesdays, logging in on Thursdays, and I'm like I would miss that sort of structured. Hey, hang out with the friends, raid, have some banter back and forth, kill some boss, have some fun, and then like for me, like I still have a couple of friends who play more casually, so it'd be like Wednesday nights are Mythic Plus nights, so like do Mythic Plus, right? And
yeah,
I don't need anything from it. Like it's not like I'm getting more powerful. Even when we were early on the expansion, like
yeah,
I wanted a mount for KSM, so like we literally try to do KSM dungeons. So it's like, yeah, it's like stupid stuff like that. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. We'll see how well goes. I just think,
I would say I don't have high hopes, and specifically because they pushed back getting tier sets back from 9.1 to 9.2
yeah, and I,
because they wanted to put in another bullshit system for raid gear.
yeah, God,
So I don't have high hopes for 10.0. Not gonna lie.
yeah, yeah. We'll see. We'll see. So I think maybe that's a good segue because we did have something about raid loot and BOEs.
Yes,
In the
finally.
Morgan Day interview. So yeah, so this week there was another interview. This time, Slootbag, my bald-headed brother, in arms, interviewed Morgan Day. Morgan Day is I don't know what his title. He's like a lead designer. I
He's
don't.
like a lead combat designer or systems designer or something like that.
Yeah, he's been there forever. I mean, I remember Morgan Day back in even like, gosh, like BC era, talking to him when he was a little bit lower. So, but yeah, so Morgan's been around for a while. Really good guy. Not maybe the best interview. So they touched on a lot of different topics. They touched on a bunch of Torgas stuff. We've already talked about it. They already rehashed it, I think, even with the Ian interview. Um, I don't think there's much really to talk about here other
Oh,
than
we've already
like,
said more words on Torghast today than were necessary.
yeah. So he went over Torgas stuff. It's it's Torghast. But the actual part I did want to talk about was more like the class balance part. So they did
Yeah,
ask a couple of questions about class balance, and I think he had a couple of key points which I don't actually think are ever going to come to fruition, but he did say a couple of things. I think the first thing was essentially like from a class balance perspective, they're looking to essentially do a little bit more hands-on tuning, meaning tuning like potentially individual things. He gave an example, I think, at this point of the conversation around holy priests and the fact that like they're building a new spell for or redesigning an existing spell to give holy priests a specific niche, right? In a raid, which is good. It's a little bit more hands-on tuning. Problem is they've said similar things in the past about this, where they're
in fairness, the last time they said this about shamans in BFA, shamans got no changes.
yeah. So I mean, they've said this sort of we're gonna do more things. They've also sort of mentioned like they do want to buff specs or like they don't typically like nerfing specs. So they do want to buff specs that are underperforming. They don't like to do it around raid launches, at least within the first couple of weeks of those, because people have picked classes, they've leveled things, they put time in. They don't want to sort of upset that balance. So
Yeah.
whatever.
On the one hand, I
I think
appreciate
it's
that.
stupid.
On the other hand, if they didn't require us to invest so much time outside of raid in preparing a character, it wouldn't feel as bad. Got nerfed. This is
Agreed.
kind of that same argument with Torghast. Like if I didn't have to invest an hour and a half to get to that last boss before I died, if I had died in 5 minutes instead, I wouldn't have.
Yeah. if it didn't take like what is it like 14 weeks to raise your renown or whatever, like
Yeah,
it wouldn't be that bad. So that was the big thing. That's something they're talked about. Blizzard is terrible at balancing. Not maybe that's a bad statement.
I think it
Blizzard
is
is
honestly, but
mm,
I think so. That's a great sentiment by Morgan, but when's the last time that Mistweaver had relevant utility? Ever? Did they have them in
uh
Mop?
relevant in terms of like we
A reason
provided
to
some
bring in
passive
Mistweaver.
other than our healing. I mean, Mop was good in terms of like the damage we brought. We were sort of the first iteration of that, but it was really just our healing was really strong then, so it wasn't really a niche there. Yeah, no, hasn't really been.
I'm pretty sure that's the answer you gave last time I asked you that question too. Actually, now that I
Yeah,
think about it, um,
yeah,
like if you want to give Mistweavers utility, Mistweavers have had so close to zero representation over the entirety of Legion and BFA. Like you gave Mistweavers a complete
since the
redesign
rework.
in Legion, and they've sucked ever since. Why do they still not have anything? Why is Holy Priest getting more? There are. And this isn't to be like, oh, Holy Priest shouldn't get anything. This is like, obviously they can completely redesign a healer CD in a patch, right? This is a patch. This is 9.1. Holy Priest is getting a CD redesigned. Where is Revival's redesign?
I yeah. I mean, I
Like
think
I've brought that up before. I feel vindicated because I had brought this up before that they could totally redesign Revival in the space of like a patch, and
I think that's what they
people
couldn't.
told me
Yeah,
no, they can't do spell changes in the patch. It's way too big. Obviously they can.
yeah, yeah. And
Obviously they can.
yeah, and I think I mean it doesn't help the fact too that you have a class like Holy Paladin that's been. I mean, that to be fair, is getting changes. They're getting a bunch of like
Yeah.
damage nerfs, right? But why weren't these put in 4 months ago? Like, it's not like the Holy Paladin damage issue, like thing has been a
Yeah.
brand new issue in the past week. Like, you could, if you really talk about it, like, and here's where like I literally like Morgan is probably a great person. I have zero faith in this happening because they've yet to ever actually do this. Like they've always talked about we want to make nerfs and buffs quicker mid patch. Like we want to do this stuff faster and basically make more changes over the course of the way to get that balance there, get it closer. They've never done it.
So in the
So
specific
it's
case of
like
Holy Paladins, I don't think they actually could have nerfed them without impacting people's raid comps in a major way.
who cares? Like here's the
I
thing. Here's
care.
the
As
thing.
someone that has to put
Well,
together a raid comp, I
but
care
but
a
here
lot.
but
Like
here's the
it's
thing.
something
It's
like
like
so like Vengeance got nerfed a couple times. And that was fine. They didn't suddenly become like it didn't change the reason that you brought a Vengeance team. They were slightly
yeah.
less good at what they did. It didn't change the reason you did it. And I don't know enough. Like the damage nerfs on Holy Paladin look pretty bad. I don't know that they're as bad as they look on paper. I don't.
I mean, I think the numbers that I saw is like if you're Vent there, it's like a 10 to 15% nerf on your
Okay, they
damage.
could have totally done that. They could have done that months ago. Yeah. Okay,
That's
I'm on
the
board
thing is
with you
that
now. I'm on
that
board with you
like the
now.
Holy Paladin nerfs, the way they were written is they're generally damage only nerfs.
Yeah.
There's a slight change in terms of how like their healing works, but you can still play the Glimmer slash Holy Shock build with
Yeah.
even the
Like I
nerfs
was
in place.
thinking. I was thinking
No,
these
it
nerfs
does. It
were
doesn't.
way bigger than they are. Um, and that's like so if they had like say brought Holy Paladin's damage down to Mistweaver levels, um, that would have impacted strat like our strat for Denathrius because like we drop Ashen Hollow on one of the ads in phase 2 and our Holy Paladin is number 1 or number 2 damage on that ad consistently
Yeah.
because nobody else is
Well,
hitting, like people other people don't have CDs for it at that time. But like that's her assigned CD. She drops it. Ashen Hollow basically solo heals us while she just DPSs the ad, and
yeah.
it's great.
It's great. I mean, and that's the thing is that like it would have sucked for strats, but like again, they talk about this like we want to make changes a couple weeks after progression starts. You hit sire no, like months after progression started,
Yeah.
right? Like
Oh yeah.
so like if they made the changes in like week 6 or 7, you would still have had enough time to adjust
Yeah.
to when you got to Sire, whoever, like whatever boss it was. So that's what I'm saying is like I have zero faith in like Blizzard doing this. Like
Oh
it's
yeah,
great that they're making
yeah,
changes to Holy Paladin, but like more like, and this is sort of my issue with Ian in a lot of these interviews. It's a lot of it's lip service.
yes,
It's like at a certain point, like you can only tell me so many times you're going to do something and not do it before I'm just like, save your breath because I don't care. So in any
yeah,
event, that's the Morgan thing. They're talking about it again. Whatever. We're never going to see it. However, Morgan did around class balance, talk about the Paladin nerfs, right? Which had been posted, I think, either right before, right after this
right
interview,
after they
right?
had not shown up yet.
Gotcha. So they're there. And then he did mention Mistweaver numerical buffs or numerical changes.
Yeah,
Really, he didn't really say buffs specifically, but changes. Which
unless Mistweaver gets an actual raid cooldown, I don't think that will change anything.
no, I mean, unless you can. I mean, to be fair, unless you can drop a healer and bring a Mistweaver, essentially, if a fight's a 4 heal fight and you can bring 3, and one of those healers being a Mistweaver,
Yeah, like
I mean, we'll be better. We'll be probably better from a community perception perspective, but in terms of overall power,
yeah, and like we have one of our, I guess now our priest, our healer priest has in the past played wholly on some progression instead of disc
uh-huh,
because our timers were unclear, so he like couldn't set up ramps, and if disc can't set up ramps, like can't do healing.
they do 0
So
healing,
like
yeah.
if our timers were all over the place, then he just like would play holy and heal people. And then once our timers were clear, he would switch disc. And like so disc actually saw some play for us. Is like and like this is speaking as someone where we had a Mistweaver in the raid all the way up until 9.0. And that's our Mistweaver reroll to Resto Shaman.
Oh,
So it's not even like they're totally unplayable. It's just like it was always incredibly hard to justify bringing him on a fight.
yeah. Yeah, which is funny. Which is funny because I played. I mean, personally, I played Mistweaver through like Nighthold in Legion, which is where like Mistweaver was awful. The opening
Yeah.
tier of Legion, like just god awful. I mean, but you could play it, and I think like the idea was like they got that we like at the time it was like they got the rework wrong. It's fine, but then
Never
they
changed it.
doubled down on the
So
fucking rework. So
I just want
anyway,
to say we have a second Holy Paladin in our raid comp for Denathrius this week.
awesome.
And that is going to make the fight so much easier. Both of the ads in like we do the 2-2 strat for ads on Denathrius, so on the
Yeah,
second set of ads downstairs, each one will have an Ashen Hallow on it. That's so big just by itself.
so
Like,
awesome.
but then
So
we get to
awesome.
phase 3 and both of the tanks are gonna have a beacon.
I see. Beautiful.
I'm
Beautiful.
so excited about that.
You're never gonna
I
die.
gave
That's
my
awesome.
co-tank my beacon last week, and I would like phase 3 actually was mostly okay, depended on dodge RNG, but phase
Yeah,
2 was terrifying.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Yeah. So I mean, that's so awesome. Numbers tuning for Mistweaver. But we'll see exactly what those are. They haven't been on the PTR yet. Hopefully this week. But
Yeah,
Paladin's getting nerfed. But you're still gonna bring Paladin. So
yeah,
the other thing. So the next part of the conversation I thought was actually pretty interesting was Morgan touched a little bit on encounter design. And the fact that like he basically said it out loud, which I think most people would potentially agree with, is that encounter design actually probably has a bigger influence on class, quote unquote, like class balance or like
yeah,
the class meta than anything you do with a class.
yeah.
Right. Like if certain encounters, like the reason rogues were so good in Tomb of Soak Garrus, right, was because you
Cloak
could cloak and soak a ton of
family,
mechanics and only needed one person to do it,
and
right?
that
So
would
you
often just
brought rogues.
completely remove something from the fight, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you'd have one less mechanic or one less thing to think about. You had a rogue do it, right?
Yeah,
So I think, I mean, rogue still did good damage, but like if it wasn't like that, you probably would have maybe brought more range, maybe brought a different set of melee to go, right?
yeah,
Similarly, like the reason DKs are brought, like AMZ is so good,
yeah,
right? Like if AMZ was not as good, you probably still run one or two of them, but like you wouldn't run like three, plus.
yeah.
So,
And he
um,
mentioned the like damage cap route of nerfing AMZ again. That's something that Ian
yeah,
mentioned as well.
which I think they're
I
gonna do.
I really hope they don't because it's going to basically say AMZ doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Because what's going to
yeah,
happen? Like, imagine if I'm going to use Sledge Fist as an example. AMZ doesn't actually work on that fight, but if hypothetically it did on like a pillar break, and you dropped AMZ and it's got a damage cap, it's useless because it's not actually a raid CD. It's going to pick a few people that are standing in it, and they're going to get value from it, and the rest of the people are going to get nothing, and they're just going to
Right.
die. That's not the raid CD.
Right. And it'll be random too. So
Yeah.
like you won't know who in the AMZ is able to soak. Yeah. It'll be annoying, but
Um.
we'll see what they do there. But that I
Yeah.
thought that was an interesting point. And then
And I
just
mean,
the other thing about
it's
sorry.
it's very true. Something from our end of the spectrum. Brewmaster, BFA encounter design, as far as tanks are concerned, was dominated by auto attacks. Just auto attacks, things that applied from auto attacks, everything the whole way through. Jaina was so bad about this, where her all she did to tanks was auto attack, and the only thing that her tank debuff did was make her auto attacks do more damage. And if you were dodging and staggering all those other auto attacks, Brewmaster was great.
Yeah.
Um, then we hit Nyalotha, and so much of the damage was magic damage. And Brewmaster suddenly was so much worse because it just was not as strong against magic damage as something like Blood Decay. The damage, like the physical damage on the whole, was actually way down, so Blood Decay and Prot Paladin actually got better. And then this tier, our stagger percent actually is so much lower than it had been, and the damage, like on Denathrius, so much of the damage intake comes from Primordia Bleed, Scorn, phase 3, which are both applied by auto attacks, and actually you can dodge them, so Brewmaster is still pretty good. It's just like not overwhelming because both actually really hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, which is just like leads to that idea. Encounter design or the way again, we
And,
talked about this earlier,
yeah,
the peak, right? Where's everybody headed to? The rating peak. It's like rating sort of influences a lot of that, right? Um, so that was just an interesting point for him to bring up, which I think is it makes sense, right? It's pretty logical. But then he also in the same sort of Morgan in the same sort of question and an answer, right? Talks about the fact that like they have some boss archetypes they always want to include
like a
in
patchwork fight.
raids. So he mentioned specifically like patchwork fights, right? So again, just a little bit of tidbit in the way that they're really not trying to do interesting things anymore. It's just like we
I
need to
don't know if
have
I agree with that. I see it more of like a all right. I'm not going to be like a Blizzard apologist here or something, but I do think that it's less that they want to do like a copy of a previous boss, and more that they want to make sure they're stretching. Like they want different parts of the kit to always be represented. They always want to have like a pure single target boss, right? And it may not literally be like patchwork, you know,
yeah.
but they want to have something that's just pure single target, so the specs that are good at pure single target have a chance to shine. Never mind the fact that most fights are actually like mostly single target, so they're always going to have a chance to shine for the most part.
Yeah.
But then like something like Sledge Fist is pure physical damage. A tank that's like really good against physical damage is great there. Brewmaster, phenomenal. Um,
Right.
something like Enerva that's heavy magic damage, Prop Paladin is better, Blood Decay is better. These are both early bosses, so it's a little bit like, well, Sludge Fist Enerva's an early boss. Denathrius, though,
Early.
pretty high magic damage intake as well, so like Blood Decay is like Blood Decay is actually really tanky. So like they're actually just
Yeah.
the damage sucks there. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, for me, it was more of an interesting tidbit that
yeah,
he sort of dropped in there that like, oh no, we have like archetypes we like to hit on in our raid design team. And
yeah,
I'm like,
and like I don't mind if they're gonna have the single target boss, the hectic Agcleave boss. Like there's still a lot of flexibility within those, right? Like Shadhar versus Sledgefist are totally different.
yeah. Yeah, they
By the way, Sledgefist
w-
is significantly better than Shadhar.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean yeah, I guess you're right in those regards. I don't know. I think, yeah, to me, it just sort of sucks that they have a formula. I like to think of
Okay,
Blizzard
yeah,
designers as like, hey, we just want to do cool ideas because that's
yeah.
all I talk about. But yeah,
Um,
that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. I guess you're right. They are very different fights in terms of like, well, having a single target fight's fine. You could still have variation in that, in terms of like, yeah, how the design or how the fight actually plays out. Sorry. So,
yeah,
fair enough. The only other thing on class balance, like this sort of section, I mean, he went back into sort of specific changes that are coming. So like the AMZ nerf, the Holy Paladin nerf came up. Mistweaver came up again. This sort of talked a little bit about Holy Priest and their cooldowns. Um, so the only really thing they touched on right at the end here was around raid utility, which he again sort of reiterated, I think, what Ian had already said, which is around they want to start looking at like class utility versus spec utility, and like the idea that like potentially classes that currently don't have a lot of utility from a rating perspective get it added in. So Rogue Smoke Bomb came up here.
Slootbag, like, huge props to him. Asked about the physical and magical debuffs
Yeah,
specifically. Morgan Day gave a non-answer and proceeded to talk about other class utilities.
that's true.
Ugh, it's um those aren't utility. Like they're like comp Jenga kind of things, but they're not utility.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, this was actually, I think that might have been the first answer that started to go down this weird path, the interview where Morgan just gave some really weird answers. Like the
Yeah.
the notes, like if you just read the cliff notes of it, like whether it's the Wowhead or whatever, Icy Veins, like blog post, it didn't really come out. But if you actually watched sort of this section of the interview and then the next section where they started talking about like raid loot and things like that, he just it was it was weird. Like it's just like he went off on some tangential things that I don't think really hit. So
Yeah.
just sort of bring
My
that up.
read is he couldn't give the answer he want that we wanted to hear, which is they're going away. Um
Yeah,
and couldn't justify leaving them in. Said something else.
yeah,
But he's also, unlike Ian, not a lawyer, and doesn't have probably the level of public speaking discipline to not go off in the woods,
yeah. But
which we
yeah, so
could use
sorry.
some of.
That's true. That is true. We should probably work on that, get our law degrees. But no, so then the next section of the talk sort of talked a little bit about like raid loot and like BOEs and stuff like that. So this is where he talked a little about BOEs next patch. There's basically going to be less BOEs in general, but they're also going to be rarer, I think was sort of the other thing they talked about. So
Yeah.
that doesn't sound fun,
At the same time,
but
like I think they did drop too frequently in Castle Nathria. Like we
yeah.
had trash packs that we killed, and we got 4 BOEs.
We did a
We
I still
were
remember it. Oh, sorry.
we legitimately discussed dedicating one of our raid nights to doing a trash farm because the amount of loot you got was so much higher than killing actual.
Yeah, we had one night, the going towards the Sun King Artificer council wing where you kill all that trash up there.
Yeah,
We didn't death run it or cloak it, and we ended up getting something like 7 or 8 BOEs one night, which was just like ridiculous.
that is for reference. Currently, 2 bosses worth of loot.
Yeah, which is
At the
for
time,
half
it was
hour trash.
probably closer to 3 bosses worth.
Yeah, which is just ridiculous. So
Yeah,
yeah, they're going to drop less BOEs, or sorry, less BOEs in general are going to be available from the raid, and then potentially BOEs drop less
yeah.
often. So
I think the bigger thing is like each class like is gonna have, or each armor type is gonna have fewer slots that can be filled by BOEs. So like right now you can fill, is it 4 slots or 6 slots with BOEs?
I think it's
Cloak ring, 2 other slots.
yeah, so I think it's four,
Okay,
4 or 5. Yeah,
you're gonna be able to fill like 2 or 3 next year,
it's
um,
just fair.
which is actually a pretty big nerf to BOE power because like I'm wearing 4 BOEs right now. They just dropped in raid.
Yeah,
They have my best stats on them. They're first crit. They're amazing. Um, and having half as many means that I will be wearing more loot from actual bosses.
yeah. Which is, I mean, which is always good. It's always fun to get loot. Like much as some people say they play the game, and me included have said I will only play the game to kill bosses. Like, not gonna lie, it's exciting when I get
It
purples.
is exciting to
So
get loot.
exciting.
Like I am not playing this game for the loot, but boy, is it exciting to see that. Like I got a Shriekwing trinket a couple weeks ago. Boy, it was exciting to finally see that drop.
Exactly. So yeah. So talked a little bit about that. Also talked about loot dropping in terms of, or not specific loot in terms of weapon tokens, and the fact that weapon tokens are not coming back.
This
And he
is the
actually gave
other major spot where things went kind of like in a weird direction.
weird. Yeah, so he talked about weapon tokens, which was his explanation for why they did it and why they're not doing it moving forward. So his explanation why they did it was because they had built or designed all these cool Covenant weapons. And he said it would have felt weird if the last boss dropped like a Night Fae staff and only Night Fae casters could use it. So they would like, we'll just do weapon tokens. And it makes sense because you get your cool thing. So he's like, so in, I don't know if this section you're talking about, but then he talks about the fact that in Sanctum of Domination, there are no weapon tokens. You will loot bosses for their weapons, such as the Sylvanas bow, you will loot from her corpse.
Yeah.
And then he's like, corpse in corpse in quotation marks.
Well, okay, that was kind of funny, but
Which I love. I'm like, we kill her. Yes, dick, get the fuck out of here. Sorry. And then, so what was your part? That was the part. That's the only part I remember.
I just thought it was. So then they went into this like, okay, so Sloot basically pressed him on the fact that like everybody loves weapon tokens. Like, I've never heard a single person be like, "Oh man, this is a weapon token, not an actual." Like, no, weapon tokens are great.
Yeah.
It's so good,
Yeah.
and there are some flaws with like the covenant specific stuff, where like the different covenants actually have different stats on their weapons,
Yes.
which is annoying. But weapon tokens are great. Give me weapon tokens any day of the week, and it avoids some of the weird stuff. Like so, last year, every spec in the game had either an item that came off of the last two bosses at higher eye level, or an item in raid with a unique corruption on it. Priests had actually neither. Uh,
I forgot about that.
Technically, the Mott staff is a unique corruption effect, but it was dog shit. So that sucked for brewmasters. Um, like we had people that for memes ran the Infinite Stars sword
Love that sword.
as non-intellect classes, just as a joke, but that doesn't count. And so it's just it it I don't under so basically the justification he gave is like we want bosses to drop items that fit the boss. And like so Mott, if you fought him, has a big staff that he uses. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Why does Nizoth drop a sword?
Because he ate someone who had a sword once. I don't know. It's a big giant squid
Like,
thing.
I
Yeah.
understand wanting to give Sylvanas a bow. I think that's actually really cool. But there's no reason they can't give Sylvanas a bow and also a weapon token.
Right. Yeah. And this was sort of the answer that was like very, very weird in terms of like trying to
Yeah.
justify why it happens. And I think at the end of the day, if he was just like, look, we like had a bunch of art assets we needed to use in the first tier. So we did weapon tokens because we could use them all. And like in the second tier, we're gonna go back to the way WoW has always been, which was like bosses drop weapons. Like bosses don't drop tokens. Like
Yeah. But
unless
I
it's
mean,
tier sets.
one of
But
the things
yeah.
that was really nice about weapon tokens, beyond the like people getting screwed on last year with corruption stuff,
Yeah.
is that personal loot actually makes it very, very difficult to get certain kinds of weapons. And this is something we've talked about before, where I bitched at length about how hard it was to get tank trinkets in Mythic Plus,
Right.
because
Yeah.
usually only one person can get it, and it's you. So no one can ever trade you them unless you set up a group specifically for it, basically.
Right.
In raid, like if you're a rogue, nobody else can get agility daggers. Just like no one. Period. Windwalkers can't use agility daggers.
Yeah.
Um, so like if you want to play assassination, which requires daggers, two of them even, cannot use any other type of weapon,
Right.
then you just are kind of screwed. Like you're gonna get them at a much slower rate because of personal loot and no one being able to trade you them, compared to say strength one-handed swords, which every single strength class in the game can get in one of their loot specs. There's things like DK has two specs that can't get one-handed swords, but Frost can.
Right.
warrior can in everything but arms, paladin can in protection. So you're already like very likely to have at least one other person in the group that can trade it to you, which just straight up makes you twice as likely to get it.
Yeah, but I think so. Weapons specifically have that, like, but there's also armor that has that specific issue
I
too.
mean, yeah, it has that issue too, which makes male classes kind of suffer.
Right, like that's the classic example is there's only what two male classes, right,
Right.
in the game that raid. So like hunters and shamans
I
gear
think
up
it
pretty
is
quickly.
a bit of a bigger problem with weapons because of how impactful it is to get a weapon upgrade.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's there. I don't know. I mean, I'm not for or against weapon tokens. I don't think they technically matter. I just think this answer was weird. Like I
Yeah,
just
this
think
answer was weird and bad, and I'm of the personally, my hot take is for hunters, if they're in a like not survival loot spec, then if they would get a weapon token, they just get a bow instead.
yeah, or I mean like the idea too is like they used to have this, I forget, they used to be able to they did those armor tokens, right?
Yeah,
Where if you looted an armor token, you could right click it and it changed into the item in your bags.
yeah,
So why don't they do that with weapon tokens? With
yeah. Actually,
like which is the idea where like they want to be like, well, you need to loot it from the boss. So it's like, well, I can bring myself out of this for half a second and say like, okay, well, I get this token, it turns into a weapon, click it, I still get the loot pop up that says you received this weapon or whatever, but it's the weapon for my
yeah,
spec or my class, whatever it is off the boss, right? Like that would be the idea too. I mean, the funny thing too is Sloot. I think the other part of this conversation with Sloot was that like there are certain classes when we talk about weapons on the final bosses when we don't do tokens, right? When we just do
yeah,
pure weapons that don't have a highest item level weapon,
yeah. I will bet you money right now there will not be an agility pole arm on the last two bosses.
which just means you don't get a weapon that is the same item level as every other
Right.
class
Like
or every other class that has weapons on
Brewmaster
the last two.
thankfully can use almost every agility weapon period. Like it can use everything except daggers, basically.
Right.
So as long as there's any agility weapons on the last boss that aren't daggers, we'll be able to use it. Um, but yeah, it is. That wasn't the case last expansion because we could only use two-handed weapons. So anytime
Yeah.
there wasn't a two-handed agility weapon on the last boss, we couldn't get the increased eye level.
Yeah. Yeah, which is like another issue, like around the fact that like what's the again, like you at the end of the day it's a game, so you can't always make it like lore, like realistic, like
Yeah,
if Sylvanas only is a hunter, right? Like she can only have bows and maybe a dagger, right? Like there's gotta be some sort of break there in
I
terms of the
cannot wait
immersion.
for people to meme Sylvanas' loot table because you know what it's gonna have? It's gonna have her bow. We're gonna have the quiver too. It's gonna have um
Didn't they already announce it? What's on our loot table?
there's some stuff in the dungeon
Yeah,
journal, but it's not final. It's a bunch of placeholder items.
gotcha.
And it's gonna have some random stuff like it's gonna have an intellect weapon. It's gonna have a random ass sword
She's
or
smart, but she's
axe.
smart.
It's gonna have a two-handed weapon of some kind.
So funny.
And like
Yeah.
Kel'Thuzad, why does Kel'Thuzad drop anything besides a two-handed intellect staff? Like
Doesn't make sense.
I understand them wanting to be like, oh, this is Kel'Thuzad's staff. Like, sure, give it a staff and a weapon token.
Yeah.
It's not that
Yeah,
hard.
no. Yeah, no, I get it. So I mean, I think that's the other part of this is that yeah, weapon tokens just don't I I mean, I get the fact that traditionally WoW has dropped items and they sort of have had this sort of niche thing with armor tokens, right? Because I understand like it sucked when we used to have set bonuses when like you get warlock set items and not have warlocks in your group or
Yeah,
have two warlocks in your group and it's like,
they
well, we
both have
got
it already.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I understand like traditionally why they've always had it, but it's just it is to that point. Like weapon tokens would be cool. I just there's a nostalgia thing here, and there's probably like a game maybe ideal here where like it doesn't always make sense, and like weapon tokens were sort of a one off for now. But they've added tokenization to things other than armor. I feel like in the past, right? Like wasn't there? Gosh, I'm trying to think. There's another loot thing that wasn't armor that was a token based thing.
I don't remember. I
Was
don't
there
think
something in
there was. There was
what?
the
What about the remember the what
relics.
is The relics, weren't they
Yeah.
like that?
They were
That's
not
what it
tokens. It was just like you got a life relic, and that relic did different things for every, which
gotcha,
had some
okay,
fun
okay.
side effects because none of the raid relics were facepalm.
Yeah. Yeah, which I mean, like, but that's the idea too, is that it's one item that
Does different things
anybody
for
could
different
use,
people.
yeah. Yeah, so I could try that out. I don't know. It's just, yeah, weapon tokens, I feel like they're not coming back. I feel like this was like a one-time thing. So,
It's such a
um,
good system because of because of the diversity of weapons, right? And the intersection with personal loot. I feel like this was such a good thing because if you wanted to play
yeah,
again, I'm gonna go back to Assassination Rogue because I think they have it the worst because of the dagger work. This is like this makes Assassination Rogue gearing on an equal footing with every other spec in the game. Like they
yeah,
still have the they need two weapons thing, but then again, it's not as bad as needing specific it's a little bit harder if you only needed one two hand. Like admittedly,
yeah,
it is a little bit easier or a little bit harder. But it is so much better than needing specifically two daggers to drop.
yeah. Yeah, but then you have the opposite of that where you have like if you use a one-hander and an offhander, two one-handers, right? Like actually no, in this case a one-hander and an offhand item. Like you get a weapon token and it sucks. 'Cause you don't get one of the two. So there's like many times where like I would get an offhand
Except
weapon
that
token.
they only so for monk, I know there's not a weapon token for monk off of Stone Legion generals or a main hand weapon token. There's an offhand one. Denathrius drops the main hand one. So it's like
Right.
one on each because it's broken up by class.
Right. But like my point is more you get an
Okay,
offhand
so I guess
weapon
it
token and like the token is essentially useless to
until you get
me.
a main hand weapon token.
And but it's a token, so technically I would be more obliged to trade it if I could,
Yeah,
right? Versus keeping it because it would suck for me like if I got an offhand token, could go to any of the class. I don't know who's on my token, but it could go to another class of my token. And I'm like, well, shit. Number one, I don't have a 233 offhand, so I have to keep it because of personal loot, right? Which sucks in itself. But number two, I'm not even going to equip this for a couple weeks because I don't have a main hand to go with it, right? So that's like the twofold thing that comes in with this. So um but yeah, I mean, I maybe that's always a loot thing, and maybe weapon tokens are just they're nice for the distribution aspect of it. Maybe not. Those situations aren't going to change whether it dropped an actual offhand item or not. So that's more of a personal loot issue there.
yeah.
Um, all right. Well, moving on off loot, I think there's probably only one big thing I wanted to cover the rest of the interview, unless you had anything else, which was just they gave a little bit more detail on the shards of domination, which are the sort of the new loot thing that's coming with the next patch, which is they've expanded. So I think when we originally data mined this, there was like one socket you had on your cloak that you could drop a really powerful gem into, and then
Yeah.
you got
It
powerful
was
stuff. Now
basically
they've
an essence.
yeah, it was basically, yeah. So now they've changed it where there will be 5 sockets across your gear on shards loot, and there are 3 types of sockets or 3 types of gems that could go in those sockets. So the gems will have types. I don't know. I think it was like blood,
Blood, Frost, and
frost,
Holy. They are the
holy.
DK stances, basically.
Gotcha. So there's 3 different types of gems, 5 gem slots you can slot these gems into, and then if you equip 3 of the same gem type, you get an additional bonus. So if you have 3 frost gems in
And
your 5 available slots, sorry,
that bonus only works in raid.
I thought it was raid or
It's
the
oh
new
sorry, yeah,
zone.
it's raid in the new zone.
Yeah, yeah. So in raid in the new zone is where it'll work. So, but that is the new corruption 2.0 system, as Emerson I think continues likes to call it, or it's just the new.
I don't think I've called it that since they revealed
Well,
what it was.
that's fair. That's true. You haven't since we talked about it. But the idea is this was sort of their new gearing system
Yeah.
that they've talked
I
about.
still
So
don't. I would rather have gotten tier sets. I would
yeah.
rather have gotten tier sets.
Now we get to find out what shitty blood, because blood's gonna be the tank
Oh
one,
yeah.
frost maybe the DPS one, and holy the healing one. So I'll have 3 unholy gems because that's the healing one, regardless of what it is. Real exciting. Thanks, Blizzard. Um, yeah, that's the shitty part about systems like this that have to apply to 36 specs. Like
Yeah. I
however
mean,
many it
I can
is.
tell you right now, unless the tanking one is really nutso, or the DPS one is really bad, tanks are going to be using the DPS one for the
Yeah, yeah,
because the tanking ones are almost always.
yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. So that's basically. There's a couple other. You know, he said like no mini raids coming, whatever.
Yeah,
And they did some Mythic Plus talk, but in general, that was the interview. They ran out of sort of time, I think. So,
just like we
uh,
are because
yeah,
we are very quickly approaching the 2 hour mark on a show that was supposed to be shorter
we
because
ranted a little. We
we
ranted a
ranted a
little.
little bit.
Yeah.
But so there was some raid testing this week. It was the first, so we had mythic testing of the first two bosses, which wasn't very interesting. Eye of the Jailer is still kind of broken in various ways. I only got like it was an hour of testing. I got like 25 minutes in on it between people not being able to answer the instance, some people no showing, and then um, just like lag. Like we had
Yeah, like
people
generally,
that
yeah.
would like something would happen to them and they'd go to 2000 world MS.
Jesus.
And then things like the Valkyrie that they're supposed to like drag you off the edge, we're not actually dragging anyone, so like an entire mechanic was missing. Um, but like
That's fun.
it's the first two bosses. There's not a whole lot to say. We've talked
Yeah,
about
yeah,
them
yeah.
on a previous episode of the podcast. They are the Terragru and the Eye of the Jailer, and Mythic does not add very much to either. We had
Nice.
two bosses get tested on Heroic this week. That would be the Nine, and then I don't know his name. He had the balls that didn't work.
Pine something, I want to say.
Pain
Pine.
something?
Uh,
Painrender?
Painsmith.
Painsmith.
Painsmith Raz Null.
Yeah.
Painsmith Raz Null.
Um, I don't really want to talk about these too much because the 9 was piss easy. Like, we almost killed it our second pull. Uh, and the Painsmith was very, like, a weird testing experience because it seemed like some of the things, like, this thing on the tank that, like, puts the room that you're in is a grid. There's this mechanic on the tanks that like makes spikes pop up from points on the grid, and then like various different patterns throughout the course of the fight. Um, and it seemed like you were supposed to use those to deal with the balls that come across, but it's actually just like the balls that you get some like spiked balls that roll across the room. What you
Yeah.
actually just have to do is just DPS one of them down before it pushes you off the edge of the platform.
So
And
kind of a joke, yeah.
what the really kind of not great part about it is that like you really can't be melee and do it because the balls are rolling forwards towards you, and if you touch them, you die.
Gotcha. So
So
probably some tuning
you
there.
you can on like a technical level you can continuously like be walking backwards and continue to DPS them. I did it, but it's like if you ever misstep, you die. So in practice, it's a
Not really.
mechanic where the range just have to burn them. Right now, anyway, except for one. So the balls come from any of the four edges of the room. There's one specific edge that they could come from, and it looked like you could bait it, but it wasn't reliable. But if they came from that edge, there were three balls already missing,
Oh wow.
so you could
Okay.
just walk.
Easy.
And that
Easy.
was that was why the testing was really confusing. Is we saw that sometimes the balls were missing. And we were like, oh, it must be because we did something with one of these other mechanics that killed them, because they would like spawn and then go away. So it's like, oh, we must have had something. We must have done something make them go away. But no, actually, they just anytime they spawned from the edge of the room, it was missing some.
Yeah. So just yeah, typical PTR stuff that hopefully they'll clear up. So interesting. Yeah, I unfortunately did not do any testing because I have work.
I have made almost every test this tier.
That's awesome.
I am
That's
going to be
awesome.
unbelievably prepared for this next tier.
I like it. That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. Well, cool. I know that. So we're typically, I think, the last two sections are like lore corner and Q and A. I'm gonna skip lore corner this week just
Because
because,
you actually want to talk about the contents of it and not like skim it.
yeah, and not like go through it. So
Yeah.
I think we'll do that. So we'll hit Q and A. Of course, is my favorite part of the show, and then we'll end it now that we've been here for gosh 2.5 hours with the technical difficulties. I think almost. So
Yeah. The actual
uh,
podcast length is going to be about 2 hours and like 15 minutes, but we were here for a good bit longer.
yeah. So Q&A time, of course, my favorite part of the show. This is where you send us our questions. Well, you send us your questions, not our questions. You send us your questions, and we'll answer them. You can sort of get in touch with Emerson and myself, however you want to. Most of our stuff's out there on social media, but the easiest way is probably just to ping us in Discord. Um, and so we have two questions this week, which is awesome. So one's, I guess we'll just jump in. I don't know. I had something fun to say about them, but I didn't. Lost it. It's too late. So first up, question is from Soji hashtag delete SCF, and they ask, if you had to live in a different country, which country, or countries, if you have to pick multiple options, would you pick and why?
Do you have a good answer for this?
I do actually.
Okay, go for it. I don't.
Okay, you think it. So I would pick. There are two countries that I would probably end up settling on doing it, and for probably two very different reasons, and it would probably depend on my situation. So I'll go with the fun one first, and then the one that maybe would be more typical. So if I didn't have to work, and I was moving to this country because I somehow made enough money to never have to work again, I would honestly probably pick to live on the the western coast of Australia,
Okay.
because I think that would be pretty cool. Somewhat, it's much more remote. These sides where like all the larger cities are. I know there's what Perth is on the west side, right? So
Yeah.
still some major cities there, but the idea is it's definitely a little bit more remote. I think that would be really fun. I really like Australia. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's that would be where I'd go to quote unquote retire and never have to work again. Um, just like sit at the beach, kind of chill, play in the sand, be fun. Get like a I don't know beachfront bunch of stupid dumb toys I could take in the water, maybe a boat, be a good time.
Boat's
Now
just a
an
big
act
toy.
what's up?
A boat's just a big toy.
That's true. I have like wave runners. I don't know. We'll do some stuff. But an actual answer probably where I would move, and where I've tried to move in the past, honestly, has been Germany, actually, which is probably no
Oh,
surprise
funny.
considering I'm a huge German soccer fan. I would move to Germany. And just because I like to say quote unquote my family. So my grandparents are first generation. Well, how would you say it? They came over to America, so they're
Yeah, so
not
they're the first
first.
generation immigrant, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. So they're first generation. My dad was born here, so my dad grew up speaking well Polish and German. But yeah, so I would move there just because family stuff would be cool. Plus, dude, I've been to Munich a couple times. Like Oktoberfest is a blast. It'd be fun to sort of live there, work there. I love that Germans are generally always on time. They're very like boom, 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 very straightforward. And yeah, like I think culture is pretty cool. So that's kind of where I'd go, maybe those two places.
Okay.
So
I do not have good, well thought out answers for this. Fun fact: the last time I was outside the United States, I was 8 months old.
oh, okay,
So I have
okay.
not done a whole lot of traveling. Um, so I don't really have strong opinions on this, other than if I had to pick somewhere to live, it would be somewhere that has like single payer healthcare. As someone that had a bunch of medical bills in the past year,
It's true.
fuck that shit.
I like how your response is not like, man, I want it to have like a sweet beach or be like warm or have
So
like
I'm
great
I'm
party scene.
still like, I just got through dealing like this
Yeah,
month with medical bills from last September.
it's
And
awful,
it's not
dude.
even that I like couldn't pay them, because like I work in software, I make good money, I could pay it. But the whole system is so dysfunctional that it took me until May of the following year to actually get everything sorted out. And
That's
it wasn't
that's.
even like a huge bill
Do you
in
want to
terms of
know a fun?
American healthcare bills. It was like on the order of 8 grand, which is like a lot of money, but not like bankruptcy kinds of money.
Yeah, yeah. The
Um,
the healthcare sucks here. I
yeah.
have a fun story about that, but yeah,
Um,
we're already along.
so that's a requirement.
Okay,
One place I actually had looked at previously is Germany.
okay.
There was, while I was in undergrad, I started applying for a fellowship to go and do like a research thing
Oh,
at
cool.
University of Munich, because there was a professor there that was doing some abstract algebra stuff that I was like really interested in, and I started doing the all the prep for it without actually reaching out to him. Turns out he was retiring. He was not
Oh.
taking on more students. So I like ended up submitting this really shitty application for this scholarship, and it was honestly kind of embarrassing. But Yeah. So that's something that had been on my radar, but honestly, like I have very frequently considered just moving to Canada. Like it,
Canada's fun.
Canada, Canada's nice. I also the other thing is Florida sucks. Nothing with that kind of weather. I could do like living in the Caribbean like on the beach because the sea breeze makes
Yeah,
up
yeah.
for it. But nothing that's like tropical and inland.
Yeah, no, yeah. I would agree, yeah. If I was going somewhere warm like that, it would definitely be like on the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, but even Florida on the water, like yeah, it's not my parents have a condo in uh St. Pete's and it's not fun.
Yeah.
Florida in general, not fun. Sorry if you're listening to this and you're from Florida,
I just spent half a decade
sorry.
living in Gainesville, which is colloquially known as the swamp for good reason.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't have really strong opinions on it. I had one, so when I graduated last year, I had wanted to do a bunch of traveling, but obviously COVID just completely shut that down.
Yeah,
So I
killed
am
that.
going to try and do some in the next year. Now that I'm vaccinated, I am waiting until um it's more clear whether these like variants of COVID are going to be a threat or if the vaccines are also going to end up shutting those down.
Yeah.
But so I'm not traveling yet, but fingers
I'd hit
crossed
up.
soon, and then I
I'd
would
hit
have
like
a stronger
Asia.
idea of it.
That'd be cool. Yeah, yeah. No, I've thought about moving a lot, but it's funny how like if you would have asked me this question probably 10 years ago, like I think my answer would have been different. It would have been like, I want to move to Tokyo because that's where they make the video games and I want to have fun, right? Like and now it's like I can't move to Tokyo because like my answer is somewhat like has like my wife in mind and
Yeah.
she just will never move to like Japan or South Korea or any of the like that part of Asia for whatever reason. I'm really in general she would move to Asia because it's the food thing with her.
Okay.
She's like I can't eat the food. Um and so yeah, so that's sort of why my answer would probably be Australia. Australia was
My,
I
my
mean
my answer, in fairness, is also a little bit dictated by the fact that I speak one language and it is English. So, and
oh
that's
yeah.
one thing I have
Oh,
like made small strides towards changing, but never actually like I can do a little bit of. I took German for a environment in undergrad, but that's it.
nice. Yeah. Yeah. But no, yeah, it'd be yeah, I think that's what. So Australia and Germany for me, you're gonna go to any place that has single payer healthcare. So I like it. I like it. Well, Soji, thank you very much for the question. Next up we have a question from Nibble Pie. That's a very specific question. And it's not to me. So Nibble Pie, screw you, bud. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You can ask your question. So Noah Pie asked a question, pretty good, Emerson. And they say, you mentioned last week that you used to do jujitsu. Question: did that have any influence on your rolling a monk? And then the follow up there is, what jujitsu moves would be awesome to implement in WoW? Maybe not necessarily for monks in this case.
So, for those that aren't familiar with it, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu has a lot more in common with wrestling than it does with something like karate or I'm blanking on, but like it's not a standing sport. Fundamentally, it's a like you're on the ground and grappling,
Is
which
that the one
makes
where
it
they like where like you grab like shoulders and stuff, like arms or something when you do it? Or no?
you can. So there's
I just
judo, which is probably what you're thinking of.
Oh, I'm thinking of judo. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay,
So
sorry.
judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu are like fairly closely connected. We had a black belt judoka that went to the gym that I did Brazilian jiu-jitsu at, and he was great. Uh, big, well, he was like imagine like a real life what a real life properly proportioned dwarf would look like, which is like dwarves in real life if they were properly proportioned would not actually be like 4 feet tall. They'd be more like 5.5 feet tall, and
Yeah.
he was like a little bit over that, but like he could have played the dwarf in the movie. Um, Great guy, and would be able to throw basically anybody in the gym on their ass
Oh,
at any point.
Jesus.
Because he was a black belt in judo, but then when you're on the ground, it's a different skill set, and so he was good, but he was not like anything special as far as
Yeah,
the other people in the gym because he came in as a white belt and started learning the ground game with everybody else.
gotcha.
Um, which makes it difficult to answer that second question because it doesn't really apply to a lot of situations in WoW because you don't do ground, like you're never on the ground in WoW. It would require some other piece of setup. So I've spitballed some cool things, martial arts things, for Brewmaster before, and there could
Uh,
be things where like as part of like a sequence, you put an enemy on the ground and then you do something else as part of it that could be based on it. But fundamentally kind of difficult to build on that. The first question though, did doing jujitsu influence my rolling? The answer is actually no. I rolled my monk before I started jujitsu. And I
okay,
rolled my
okay.
monk in Legion because the Windwalker mastery is cool. Like it's really cool. It's one of the most unique and interesting masteries in the game, and I still really like it to this day. Hope they don't change it because it's a lot of fun. Um,
Interesting.
but I'm trying to think of like what a good answer for that second question would be.
So here's me not knowing anything about jujitsu. I'm assuming there's some sort of move called the bear trap, where like you sort of take somebody to the ground and then you just hug them real tight while you're on the ground trying to squeeze the life out of them.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. So there's a few different
So
things where you can go. So I learned there's a few different takedowns that you can do from standing, um, and there's stuff where you like pull people, and as part of your sweep, you're kind of swinging them around, and you land on top of them, and
yeah,
you're in a good controlled position. And there's some where you actually go under them and like take their legs out from under them, from literally underneath them. There's one that I don't know is strictly jujitsu. Is one while we were kind of off, where literally lifting yourself, like if you can get arm control, lifting yourself up on their arm, and it's so hard like to explain. I don't
I'm like,
envy my instructor trying to explain jujitsu either. Um, but imagine like just stand up, okay? Like you're standing up vertically. Like now put that against someone's shoulders and arms with their legs against the shoulders.
their leg
One
is
leg,
against your shoulders.
no, no, no. Your legs against their shoulders.
Okay, okay,
So one leg in front of their chest, one leg behind their head,
okay.
and then you rotate. And you just like the leg that's behind the head pushes forward, and
Ah,
you can put something on the ground like that, and it looks cool. It's not really that practical, but it looks really cool.
interesting, interesting. But like then in WoW, I guess that would just be like a stun, right? But the
Right,
problem is
because
like,
enemies don't have arms all the time, right? And they're
yeah,
not going
that's
to
true.
do that kind of animation for every enemy individually. So like there, since it's not something that's doing a lot of punches and kicks and things like that, it's really hard to do on
Yeah.
like a generic enemy 97. Like, and also things like my panda could not do most of the sweeps that we did from standing on Denathrius because of the size difference. It actually
That's
would
true.
not work because of leverage. Like it's not even about strength at that point. It's actually about being able to set up a lever correctly to exert force at the right spot on their body to knock them over. And because of the size difference, you just couldn't.
So it's funny that you were like, man, like leverage, like the way this works. Like, so here's my move. So I don't do jujitsu, but
Okay,
if I
okay.
did do
I'm
jujitsu,
here
this
for
is
it
the
though.
move I would be. So it wouldn't be a monk move. I'm sorry. This would actually be a hunter move, but
Okay,
I think it'd be a
okay,
really good one. So the hunter move would be called the bear claw.
okay.
I don't know why, but that's I'm naming it that. And so what happens is it's a defensive move where like if an enemy ever got to the hunter, right? What they would do is they would basically just do some weird thing. I'm not going to use names, but they do some weird thing where they basically end up like bear hugging the enemy while the hunter's on their back and the enemy's on top of them, just bear hugging, squeezing the life out of them. And as they're doing it, their actual bear comes over and bites the other guy or bites the enemy and like drags it away from you. And then like you can get up and sort of like shoot your bow again. But that's how it would work. It's basically like you stun the enemy and then your pet comes and like drags it away to range. and then you get to shoot it.
There is a big meme in sport jiu-jitsu of people doing what's called the butt scoot and a couple of variations on it,
Oh God.
where so your opponent gets points for doing a takedown,
Right.
but you don't lose any points if you just sit down. And they can't
Oh.
take you down if you're already on the ground. So what they do, and this is in it, for people that are familiar with IBJJF tournaments, International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation tournaments, use a scoring system that this was used against. You would sit down and you would scoot on your butt towards your opponent. And the
That's
thing
my move.
is, the thing is, this is actually like pretty good because someone that's actually good at it is very mobile while they're doing this. It's not like they're sitting hard on their ass and can't like react to people.
Yeah.
Their opponent can still get around them, but it's not trivial. And so that means it's actually very easy for the person doing the butt scoot to acquire a position called guard that is advantageous to them. Well, not very easy. Like, but it's like not they're not giving up anything by doing this, and they're gaining the thing that their opponent cannot score points for a takedown. They cannot lose the takedown if they do not get taken down.
That is awesome. I
Um,
love that.
so there could be like an honor talent, right? Where basically, literally, the butt scoot,
Yeah.
and what it is just basically the monk sits down, and they could totally flavor this in a WoW way, where like they sit down and they do like your Zen thing, and anyone
Yeah.
that walks in range, uh, or like the first enemy that walks in range, they like jump up and grapple and like
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that could be a
Stop.
thing.
That'd be cool.
Um,
Or or the butt scoot could be where they are like immune to stun and root effects, and they just scoot along on their butt for like.
I might see if I can find a video of that because it looks so dumb. And there's one that's
Oh,
even
it's so
dumber
awesome.
where they actually this one is way more of a meme and it's not actually very practical. Um where they started on like their shoulders on the ground. Like if you've
Okay.
ever rolled backwards and put your legs over your head like that. And there's
Okay.
no score system like reason for that. Like it gets the you can't lose takedown points if they don't take you down thing.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like a low rank cheese strat basically, where low rank people just don't know what to do against
Yeah.
that. And if you know about leg locks and sweeps from that position, then you can do that and actually like if someone doesn't know what they're doing, get a good sweep and get it into a good position. But it doesn't work against someone that actually knows what they're doing, and it
This
actually
is
like
so awesome.
it in an actual fight it would be completely useless because someone would just step on your face.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is
Oh my
against
gosh.
the rules of sport jiu-jitsu.
I love it. I love I love that this sport that people literally ruined, not ruined, but people found a way around the scoring system in a move called the butt scoot. That's amazing
I
to me.
mean,
I love it.
the butt scooting is actually a thing because you don't want to stand up if
Yeah.
someone is close enough that they can attack you while you're in the process of standing up. Because while you're standing up, you're like off balance.
Yeah.
Um, so you don't want to stand up in this situation where standing up would make you even more vulnerable. So it's like being able to move around on the ground on your butt is actually useful, but sitting down immediately on match start is a little bit different.
Oh god. It's so good. It's so good. I love it. I
That
love
answer
it.
was longer than I had intended it to be.
Yeah, but Nibble Pie, thanks for I mean, now we've all learned more about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu than I think we ever thought we would. So we learned about some sweet tactics. If you ever find yourself in an officially sponsored Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match, you need to score some points, or at least
And I'll
prevent your
add as
opponent from scoring points.
one final note on that. There's been a shift in the tournaments towards submissions to just like making it about submitting your opponent. instead of getting points. And
Gotcha.
so that kills most of the like cheese strategies.
Yeah, but if you tire your opponent out by the butt scoot, you're not using your legs that much, I feel like, if you're butt scooting.
So the other half of the butt scoot is it puts you in something called guard. Guard is an advantageous position, but it's an advantageous position defensively, not something that's directly useful for submitting. It can be transitioned into another position where you can submit your, but it by itself is not very good for that. So if you have to submit someone, it gets worse.
It's true. But you know what the best offense is, Emerson?
A good.
A good defense. A good defense. All right. We're going to end on that note.
All right.
Nibble Pie, thank you for the questions. If you guys have more questions, send them to us, but I think it's late, so Emerson, send us out.
Okay, before I send this out, actually,
Oh,
one
yeah.
more thing.
Oh, yeah.
The schedule change, right?
That's right. I forgot all about that. Yes.
Starting next week, assuming we can stream next week, please, Twitch. We will be streaming at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time until 3 p.m. Eastern Time, which does put a cap on how long we can have these episodes. So this is the last 2.5 hour episode you're gonna get.
Yes.
So we're moving from Friday nights to Sunday afternoons. That works better for my schedule, and hopefully that also works. I've heard from a couple of other people that pop in from time to time in the stream. It works better for their schedules as well. So
Yep.
hopefully that more people can come and hang out and watch the show. But we will be starting that next week. But until then, thank you for watching / listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want to support it and the other work that we do over on the Peak of Serenity, you can do that over on our Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And of course, as always, if you don't want or aren't able to support us financially, you are always welcome to come and join the lounge channels and the questions channels in Peak of Serenity and come and hang out and have a good time. Once again, Brew Lounge is the best lounge.
God, whatever.
But that's it for today's show, and we will see you next week.
Bye.